Hi guys, welcome back. Today we will learn about side effects in Jetpack Compose. So what is a side effect? First question that comes to your mind. Before that, I would like to tell you guys, if you want to learn Jetpack Compose or Kotlin or Android app development or maybe backend with Kotlin, so please don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel. I will posting the content related to them regularly. So yeah, let's come to the state side effects in Jetpack Compose. So what is the side effect? Basically, any change in the state of the app. So this is just for example, this is our, or we can say, just take a simple, suppose this is a simple composable, right? So anything happening outside, anything happening, so let's say from this compose, what is the state of this compose? This and this is the state of this composable. Fine. So if anything not related to this and related to app is happening inside the composable, that is the side effect. So basically we can say it's the any change in the state of the app, right? Any change in the state of the app, and that state is not related to composable. Fine. So let's say, for example, you can say we are calling the network API. So in the we are on the home screen, and let's say here we are calling the just network API. So that network API is not related to calling the network API is not related to this composable, but some data from that API is related to this composable. Just for example, let's take, we are passing data as well here. Fine. So let's say we are passing data as well. So this data, suppose this data will be related to the state of this composable, but the calling the API part is not related to this composable. So we will call the API inside the side effect. Similarly, if we want to initialize some things which are not related to like composables, so like initializing Firebase analytics, like loading loading database connections, loading some library, all those things will also be considered as side effects. So ideally, Jetpack composables should be side effect free, but that doesn't happen in the real world. Most of the time, we need to make some changes in the state of the app from the composables. So that's why ideally they should be free from side effects, but we can't implement that thing most of the time, right? So that's why we need some, like some tools or techniques, like some functions by which we can call those we can perform those operations with keeping in mind the life cycle of the composables, right? So the what side effects do, they keep in mind the life cycle of the composables and then perform that operations. Let's say if composables goes, let's say composable leaves the composition, its life cycle ends, right? So then that side effect will also be cancelled. That's the, like, that's the way of implementing these side effects here. So we will discuss few side effects today, like side effect, launch effect, disposable effect, and remember coroutine scope. So let's say first of all we will be covering the side effect. Fine. So what is side effect? Side effect is let's say we want to log some things for Firebase analytics. We want to log some data, right? So for those purpose we can use it. So what it does is it uses the data which is not related to the compose state. Fine. So let's say some state is, let's say, just for example, let's take count is inside this composable. Just assume like we are incrementing the count and decrementing the count, and that count we need to log to the Firebase. Just assume like we are doing here firebase.log or something similar. So let's say we are using count here, and so what will happen? So what side effect will do? It whenever this composable will be entering in the composition first time, so it will be called. So it calls on first time when its parent, like this composable inside which it is being used, that like we can say its parent is this composable's parent is this composable, right? So when its parent composable is recomposed, it only calls at that time, right? So why do we need, the question comes now. So let's say we want to print this data, like we want to send some data to the logs to the Firebase, like logging some events related to the user to the Firebase. For those purpose we can use this. Fine. So this is mostly related to using the compose state, with some data that is not managed by compose. So this is compose state, we can say, and this Firebase related data is not the compose state. So using the compose state, we can add one more point here. I have mentioned these some points where we can use this. So we can say using the compose state inside non compose code file. For that purpose we use SideEffect, right? So as of now you can just assume like we have some Firebase library here, just for example you can assume. So and we are doing some initializations, that's for the initializing this composable we need to log some events, and then let's say user goes back to some other composable and then comes back to this, then again this will be sending the log. So for that purpose we use this SideEffects. And second one is the LaunchedEffect. So LaunchedEffect is basically needed when, let's say we need to call some API, right, fetching data from the network. Let's say we want to fetch image from the network, right? So for that purpose we use this. So what it do is, if we want to, let's say we are inside the some composable, right? This is some composable, we are inside it, and now we want to call the API. How will we going to do that? So for that we can use LaunchedEffect. So it allows us calling suspend function from inside the scope of composable. Inside the scope of composable, so this is composable. Let's say here we are calling some API. Fine. And depending upon that API, change UI here, right? It's that result. And what, when it recomposes, so when, let's say, so it takes keys as well. So if we are passing some key here, if that key changes, then also it will restart, right? If we don't want it to restart on without some key, then we can pass the unit here. So then in that case, if we have passed the unit here, it will only restart whenever this will recompose, or this composable will be recomposed. So we can say it triggers on first composition or key change. So first composition, let's say it will be rendering first time, then it will happen, and let's say if key changes then. But let's say we have removed this part, so then it will only trigger on composition, it's recomposition. Fine. And third one is disposable effect. Fine. So disposable effect is like needed to lifecycle related. So whenever, let's say some composable is entering the composition and we want to do something on that time, and then same composable is leaving the composition, then we want to do some cleanup. For that purpose it is needed. So it's basically kind of start and stop. Two types of events will be related to this. So we can say let's say there is some we want to observe some, let's say if on some screen we want to observe like whenever user entered on that screen and whenever user is leaving from that screen, we want to track that thing, let's say, or we want to send the logs, or we want to do some other things for that purpose. So when we want to initialize some resource and later on we want to clean that resource within the life cycle of composable, so we can say that for that purpose we use disposable effect. So for example, I have taken the example here. Let's say we have some inside the from main activity, we want to observe the life cycle of the life cycle owner, let's say for the activity. So for this composable, just assume if we are on from the home screen, we are entering this composable, and then we have used the life cycle event observer here. And then let me make things more clear to you. So whenever on dispose will be called, without this we can't use it. So this is needed, this is must, right? So let's say we are on the home screen. Fine. from home we are going to detail. So for that we can use nav controller dot navigate. If you don't know about navigation, you can check out my complete playlist on the navigation. I will put the link in the description, so you will learn about navigation in Jetpack Compose. So let's say we are moving to detail here, and here what we have is we are using that disposable effect example, right? So we can have on start, on stop here, fine. So let's say just we are just, for example, we are just printing, as of now we are just printing some data. Log on start, log on start, fine. And let's say here we are printing on stop, fine. So let's say we try to run it, so you will understand it better. We need to update the libraries. So just for example, if you go inside the logs, and if we check, you can see this here. And now let's say, so this is some screen. Let's say on this screen we want to observe the timing of the user, or we want to do some other thing here. So that depends upon our use case. What is the use case of using this? So basically this is related to the life cycle of the composable, right? On start doing some things, and then on stop doing some things, right? So let's say we want to go to detail, fine. So we can see here, we can see log on stop. Here user has left that screen, fine. So and so let's say we have on this screen, on this home screen, we have used some heavy resource here. Let's say we have some initialize some specific database here, so we can initialize that inside this composable, and then inside this on stop, inside this on stop, what we can do, oh sorry, on dispose, we can do, we can clean that. So similarly we have added the observer here. So this observer, what this observer will do, this will be added until this composable will remain in the memory, like in the composition file. So whenever we will be coming back again to this screen, it will again trigger on start, because this event will be called, it will come here. And similarly if we are leaving this composition, this will be called, and this will removing the observer again. And in the start we are adding observer, we are removing observer, fine. So depending upon this, it will be triggering events, it will be detecting the events whenever on start is called, on stop is called. And this is some cleanup part. On dispose, this will be happening, because we can't leave our observer added to this lifecycle owner, right? So that's why we are removing that observer, fine. Now let's coming back. So if you see again, it came here. So what happened is, For this, first it added the observer, and then after adding the observer, it observed that onStart is called, it triggered that. Fine. Similarly, if we again going to this another screen, it will be triggering the onDispose, and before that it will be triggering this event as well, like onStop. Fine. So disposable effect is related to the life cycle, right? If we want to do something related to the life cycle of the composable, fine, on enter and on stop. Fine. So this is about the disposable effect, and now we have the last one, that is rememberCoroutineScope. So this one is actually, we can say, similar to the LaunchedEffect, but what is the difference? It calls suspend function from outside the scope of composable. But what LaunchedEffect was doing, it was calling inside the scope of composable. So this is composable. Inside this composable, it was calling the API. Fine. But what we can do here, let's say, yeah, here rememberCoroutineScope. So just for example, we want to show snack bar for on click. So on click, this on click, and inside this, so what will go inside this block, on click method. So this is not the part of this composable. It is outside this composable, but still this is the life cycle where about this composable, because inside this composable we are remembering some scope. So this scope will be remembered by this composable. So let's say if this composable goes out of the composition, then this scope will automatically get cancelled. So that's why, that is our main purpose. We want to execute side effects, but in a manner which are related to the life cycle of the composable, life cycle in a life cycle aware manner. Fine. So this is the example of that. So rememberCoroutineScope. So these 4 side effects are very important for the Jetpack Compose. So we have covered all these 4 side effects. So let me quickly go through them one by one quickly. So this side effect is used, let's say, for one-time initialization, right? Setting up a connection, loading data from a file, like initializing some library. And what it do is, it uses using the compose state inside non-compose code. Here, let's say some Firebase. Again, I will come to same example. We are using Firebase analytics. We are sending the events there. Depending upon compose state, we are sending the events here inside using the non-compose code. Non-compose code is like Firebase analytics, logging, etc. Fine. And compose code will be anything like which we want to send logs of, like user is doing some activity, we want to track that activity. So for that purpose we can use. And then comes the LaunchedEffect. Here we can call like API calling, right? Performing, let's say we want to fetch the image from the network and we want to remember that part we can do here, and then according to that we can change the UI here, right? Fine. And let's say, for example, if some key is changing, depending upon that we want to change this, so we can use that key. Otherwise we can use unit. So if we will be use unit here, it will not be changing depending upon the any other key, but it will be only restarting when this composable will be recomposing. Fine. And similarly, this disposable effect. Fine. Sorry, I got like a fumble here. So disposable effect. So this is similar to the life cycle, related life cycle. We want to, like, if this is the composable, and due inside its life cycle, on start and on stop, we want to do something. Whenever we are entering its composition, we want to do something, then we can do here, right? We can, after adding observer, we can, like this part is we are doing here, what we are doing is we are just observing its life cycle, right? We can do anything else as well here. It's not necessary we are need to do this thing, right? So, and then whenever this composable is leaving the screen, so we are doing cleanup here, like on dispose. Fine. So this is used to the life cycle related. This is used to do life cycle related operations, right? Initializing on the initialization of composable and cleaning up of composable. Fine. And last one is rememberCoroutineScope. So rememberCoroutineScope is, again, it is similar to LaunchedEffect, but difference is it calls the function from outside the scope of functions, like mostly like on click related. This scope is also lifecycle aware of the composable, right? So this is about the side effect, guys. So this is just an example I took. Just for example, we are calling the network API. Here it will be delayed and it will be returning the data. So here we can use, like inside the LaunchedEffect, we can call that API and update the data here, right? And similarly, depending upon that data, what we can do is we can update the UI here, can update data here. So for example, fetch data, fine. And here what we can do is we can just use a one variable is loading, that is of, we can remember that mutable state of false. Initially it is false. And similarly we can use some data here, that is mutable state of list of string type, fine. And so what we can do, we have fetch the data, right? Data fetched. In similar way, what we can do is data dot value, we can update the value of the data, fine, to the data fetched, right? And this one, suppose we want to trigger it only when this will be changing, and again if this will be changing, but we want to execute it only whenever it is true. Fine. So this logic will only be triggered when this is true. And now don't forget to make it false, so that we are done with fetching the data. It will, if it is true, it will not be triggered again, fine. We have set it false. And now here, this is the launched effect, and now here we can use that data, like we can use lazy column here, and inside lazy column what we can do is find we can like do this, fine. I hope now you have got the idea of like my intention, how you can do that, right? Item of any. So basically we have used the item, we need to use items here, fine. Data dot size, fine. And now this is the this one will be used here, right? So actually there are many extension functions related to this. Like if you type it, you will know there are many items, so they are depending upon different scenarios. So here we can see this is the string, so this will be worked accordingly. So we can use this, fine. And here we can check it if so is loading is true, then we can show some loader here, circular progress indicator maybe, and else we can show. But mostly this part, like calling the API and that those things, this part mostly we do from view models these days, right? But this example you can take, like here you are fetching the image, right? And here you are depending upon that, like showing some image is loading, and here we can show the image. You can consider it similar to that example, right? So let's say try to run it. Let's take it on home screen. just for example, or we can take it on detail screen, right? It will look good. You can see, yeah, it's done. So this is about side effects in Jetpack Compose. I hope you guys now have an idea about when to use which side effect and what are the roles of this side effect. Why do we need them, right? Each of them is clear to you. I will put this code on the GitHub and put the link in the description of the video as well. So this is about the side effect, guys. I hope you guys have learned something new about the Jetpack Compose. It will help you developing apps with Jetpack Compose by understanding these concepts. So stay tuned for more tutorials on Jetpack Compose and Kotlin. So till then, bye bye, take care, have a great time, keep coding.